Good morning. Welcome to the London Scaleup Summit 2022. We are here at the Gary King, one of the most iconic buildings in London, also for the Corporate Startup Stars 2022. With my partner Alberto here today, we're going to give some highlights of Corporate Startup Stars in general, and also the report that we're publishing and making available this week. And also, we'll cover a little bit of the highlights of what's happening in the British and UK ecosystems of startups. So to start with, a couple of background information of where we are, what we're doing here. MinderBridge is a global open innovation platform. We provide services and products for startups and corporate. We do that at scale. To give just some numbers of the activities that we manage on a yearly basis, we select, filter, and go deeper in the business propositions of more than 10,000 startups per year. We serve and we partner with more than 100 corporates. Also, as an active investor, we deal with hundreds of investors as part of the ecosystem. We are based out of Silicon Valley, though we're very international by nature. Our activities are really also concentrated during different hubs of innovation around the world, where we have our antennas, in addition to San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. We have a presence in Europe, a newly open office in Israel, and in Middle East and Asia, in South Korea. In our support and help with the corporate world, we like to say that we're feeding the corporate innovation hunger, meaning that we cover all the support of all the processes that corporates have to set up, describe, manage, and develop programs of open innovation. So really from the definition of internal structure as well as the objectives of open innovation activities, all the way to the delivery of those programs, and that it might or may not include the filtering of startups and the implementation of activities of entrepreneurship and venture building. In the support of that, we also manage hundreds of startup acceleration programs over the years. Those are just a few numbers of the startups that we have supported over the years. The total funding today of those startups have raised is almost $7 billion. We act in a very international market in general. As part of our bridging, we run acceleration programs that really span in geographies as well. And those are some of the partners that we deal with as well. Lastly, we also developed our own platform to really do an AI-driven matching between the needs of corporates, what we call the innovation challenges, and the value propositions of virtually unlimited number of startups. We call this platform MinderBridge MTB Ecosystem. It's available for corporates and startups to sign up. And this is a short video that describes the main functionalities of the platform.
Welcome to the MTB ecosystem. MTB Ecosystem is an AI-powered platform that enables business matching for startups and corporations. MTB Ecosystem helps corporate innovators find solutions to their business needs through a simple 3-step process. Step 1. Define their business needs by creating an innovation challenge from scratch or from a template. Step 2. Evaluate and manage their personalized portfolio, curated by AI recommendations based on natural language processing and inbound deal flow coming directly from startups. Step 3. Request meetings. Once the business needs have been defined and the best solutions have been identified, corporate innovators will be able to organize meetings inside the platform. MTB Ecosystem. Upload your business needs and start finding your solutions now.
As part of the platform, we already have hundreds of corporates that have joined. To join is free. We're happy to give you some support of how to sign up. Those are some of the corporates, global corporates that have already joined the platform. I think it might be a good time to talk about the summit in general of London. One of the activities that we've been doing for quite some time is to host summits in different regions where we really put our lenses of how the ecosystem of startups and innovation and open innovation is progressing in different regions. This is the activities that we run over 2022. So we started in MENA. We had a summit in Barcelona. We went to Korea, to South Korea, back in September. We have our San Francisco summit in October, and now this is the last summit of the year here in London. 2023, the agenda is as busy as ever. You can see here where we're planning to be. So we'll have our next summit in Israel, covering the Israeli and Middle Eastern ecosystem. We plan to be in some new geographies, like Australia is in the plans for this year, as well as old but always hot and interesting ecosystems like South Korea and Silicon Valley. And we plan to be back in Europe in December for the next Corporate Startup Stars. Is a good time to start talking about the activities that are more related with the summit in London. As we mentioned, we're going to cover specifically some deep dive on how the ecosystem of startups is progressing here. We're also having a few interviews, a few Monday chats that are related to deeper dives of where these ecosystems is going with some of our guest speakers that typically are experts in these ecosystem. And as usual, we do have matching sessions that are happening in the background between corporates and startups. Today, we're also we're recording during the Corporate Startup Stars activity and event. So as part of that, we'll be launching this report that is probably, if you need to read one report per year, this is the one that we'd highly recommend. It's called Evolve or Be Extinct. This is really the recap of all the activities and the studies that we've been running for this very event. And so going very deep in how open innovation activities of large corporates are evolving over time and what are the best practices and the best model. As part of that, probably it might be a good time to do some highlights of this very report. So I would give it to Alberto just to cover some of the details.
Yes, as mentioned, also welcome also from my side, even better cheers since we are in London. And again, the opportunity for being in London has been the Corporate Startup Stars. And I think this is something we have an annual event once per year when we celebrate and recognize the top 100 companies that are more startup friendly at global level. And this is also the opportunity to try to understand how the open innovation arena is evolving, and try to understand what are the trends and what are the new uprising trends. I think is in the report that Marco just showed you is where we capture, I think, the main highlights of this kind of activity. So we'll just navigate through the top highlights of the report in a way that you can have just a glance of that, and definitely you can deep dive by reading the report. First of all, the news, if there is a news in the world of open innovation, is that open innovation is no longer a black box. Is a process that works. There are different tools that we call models and initiatives that corporates put in place in order to collaborate with startups. And in order to make these tools effective, these corporates are sophisticating their internal processes and organizations. So they are building organizations that are innovation enablers or innovation support. And so all the mix of internal and external is the one that, technically speaking, is able to produce performance. And performance are innovation through and thanks to startups. Just to giving you some highlights in terms of the different initiatives that are ranging from having innovation outposts as antenna is the most relevant ecosystem. Second one is entrepreneurship program. Third one are what we call innovation labs, that are the new place that is coming out from the evolution of corporate accelerators and moving into the venture builder startup studio place. Then we have the venture client model, the world of investment of startups, mostly done through corporate venture capital, and then the M&A. Let's go quickly through these different initiatives and most to give you some highlights. First of all, in terms of innovation outpost, obviously there are two places to be. One is Silicon Valley, and the second one is Israel. But also our corporate startup start, the top 100 companies are showing that are also looking at different locations. There are some interesting growing and relevant hubs in the US. New York and Boston probably as the most interesting, most large, but there are other coming out. Latin America is becoming interesting. Asia and Far East is super interesting. Australia, as mentioned by Marco before, is becoming a place to look at. And then Middle East. Dubai is becoming a hub for all the MENA region. India is growing, and then the old-fashioned Europe is still relevant through multiple hubs. Secondly, entrepreneurship. Again, entrepreneurship is pretty strange to consider entrepreneurship sort of open innovation tool, but at the end is becoming more and more integrated with the external world. So corporates are no longer using entrepreneurship as a human resource tool to educating, to becoming more entrepreneurial, your own employees, but it's becoming a tool for generating a deal flow of initiative, and more they are integrating the effort from employees with the effort from startups. So the entrepreneurship program 2.0 are becoming a sort of one-stop shop for dealing with the early stage environment. And again, talking about early stage environment, again, the old-fashioned tools were the corporate accelerators. As you see, the corporate accelerators are fading out. Now we are going towards a sort of hybridization of different models. Entrepreneurship is overlapping with the accelerators. Incubators, they are definitely more physical, almost disappearing. And there is a new space that is emerging that is at the crossing of old-fashioned accelerators, what are called new vehicles like venture builder and startup studio, and then also the venture client, again, because there are more and more corporates trying to understand how to work with this kind of stuff.
No, I wouldn't mention what the stars are there, so you can see some logos, so probably it's a good...
Exactly, again, as you see, and that this is some picture coming from the report, when you see some logos, the corporates that this year has been recognized as corporate startups in those specific initiatives. Deep diving the venture builder model. Again, the venture builder is definitely still a niche model because just 20 out of the 100 have a venture builders. But this model is definitely on the rise. It is getting a lot of attention. There are 3 companies that we recognize. One is Wyra through the Wyra builder. The other one is 01, and the fourth one is a Daimler that has totally externalized, spun off the 886 Labs into 886 Ventures. And this is the three model that we highlighted in the report and deep dive. And again, as you may see, and this is also the sign that this model is definitely on the rise, the three different models we highlighted are also representative of different approaches, because while Wirebuilder has definitely more focus on exploiting the internal assets, the internal IP, the 886 Venture is definitely focused on spanning out new businesses, also outside of the corporate environment, while the 01 is definitely a model that is mostly trying to create new business to be hand over to the internal business lines. And again, then we have another model initiative, the venture client. Definitely is a model that works. Again, years of experience working with corporate developing this model are telling us that this model in a few years is able to produce results and performance in terms of innovation, mostly for the core business. We're talking about Horizon 1 at scale, meaning talking about a large number of POC and pilots that are able to move into substantial innovation for the company with a benefit impact of the P&L. And again, you can see three stars here. One is definitely BMW Garage, that has been one of the company have pioneered the model. The other one is Bosch, that was able to add to the corporate venture capital tool, that's Robert Bosch Venture Capital, Open Bosch, that is definitely a venture client unit. And then we have NL, that has been able to master in the model through a worldwide presence in the most important ecosystem and strong integration with the business lines. Corporate venture capital, that's the other tool. Again, if you have just to give you a message here, is that is a play for large pockets, because again, if you can see the size of the funds of the 100 corporate startup stars is pretty significant. Again, most of them are concentration about 250 million and beyond. A good percentage also above the billion, so meaning that is not something for small pockets, because that requires substantial amount of dry power. And again, this is the three company that we highlighted this year. One is EQT, that is substantially launched his third fund and talking about billions of investments. The other one is Allianz, that through Allianz X substantially has 1 billion of capital to innovate beyond the core business. And then they also have a separate spun out fund that is another super hot trend, that is AV8. Again, another trend is more and more corporates are spanning out their CVCs. And then we have an interesting leading company from Korea, that is POSCO, that has been able to support the corporate venture capital scene and the venture capital scene in Korea with over 2 billion investment over the years, and having a portfolio of vertical funds that is model that is super interesting also for its integration with the world of research and academia. And then finally, sometimes love sparks, and then corporates trigger pull the M&A trigger, and then you can see it's difficult to measure the M&A activities of corporate. On overall, particularly on this side of the pond, corporate are not that much acquisitive, because technically a larger percent of the corporate startups are acquiring less than 3 startups per year, but there is some corporates that are definitely acquiring more startups in a more serial way, and also some of them are very, very large and visible deals. Again, we mentioned 3 companies here. One is Visa. Again, everybody can think about the acquisition of Tink, but not just that. Adobe for the acquiring of Figma, but not just that. And then Walmart for the acquisition of Zikit, but not just that. Again, some example. The message is that most of the deals fall into the undisclosed or small amount. I'm mostly talking about technology sales, acquiring, while a certain amount of deals are definitely more visible and the one that probably make the news, but the real activity is beyond the scene and beyond the curtains. Just to mention, today we are launching another report that we think is super important, because again, Corporate Startup Star is the initiative that we launched to recognize the most interesting corporates at global level, because this company, we believe, might become the role models for others to follow suit, for others to follow the way. And I'm talking about small and particularly medium businesses across the globe that, despite their size, despite the industry, despite the country they operate, they have to open innovation too. And again, with ICC, that is our long-standing partners for the Corporate Startup Star initiatives, and by the way, we are partnering with them also with a brand new initiative that will leverage the power and the widespread diffusion of the core center of entrepreneurship, we are launching an initiative to democratize the access to open innovation. And so we will launch a new report that is called Gold Standards for Startup Corporate Collaboration and Open Innovation, where we can help all the corporates of the world, particularly the ones that are just in the process of starting their journey to becoming potentially and eventually a corporate startup stars, to understand how to get to the stars.
To give them toolkit, right, and sets of actions that are.
Is definitely, as you mentioned, is a toolkit. Like you see, this is just an example. Is again, we suggest which is the best starting path. What are the first baby steps to be done to enter in the open innovation world, and then what can be the potential actions to follow. So I believe it's a super important initiative. And again, I invite you to download both reports from our platform, and you can see Evolve on Be Extinct. That is the report that we launched today for corporate startup stars, and the Gold Stardust for corporate startup collaboration that will be published through ICC.
Okay, so we're here today with Priya Guha, old friend. The friendship is old, not that not that the friend is old, but also an expert of the UK innovation ecosystem at different levels, also coming from years of background in the public support. When we met, Priya was the Consul General for UK in Silicon Valley, so in an area where there's a lot going on, in particular with the startups and scale-ups through the support of an ecosystem that is pretty mature as the one in Silicon Valley. Back in the UK, many years ago, I lost the count. 3, 4?
6.
Oh my gosh, time flies. Exactly. There was a COVID in between, 6 years, and an even more active operator in the world of innovation and through investments, support of the ecosystem, and in general, an expert of macro trends of what's happening today. So today, the idea is to spend some time to talk about your point of view, in particular, what are the macro trends, some of the highlights of the British ecosystem in general. And maybe with that, we can start from some little research that we normally put together, just to get a sense, driven by the numbers, of how the ecosystem compares with different similar ecosystems around the world. So maybe I'm going to pass it to Alberto to share some numbers.
Yes, so welcome, Priya. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And again, talking about and looking at this number together. So again, this number tells us how many scale-ups do we have in the different ecosystems. And again, this is the first line. Then the second line, what we call the scalers. Company able to raise 100 million, not just $1 million. The fourth line are the what we call super scaler, able to raise $1 billion, the big ones. And then the fourth line tells us how many capital has been collectively raised by all these companies. And then the last two lines compare the number of scale-up with the population, 100,000 people, how many scale-ups every 100,000 people. And the last one, compare the capital raised with the GDP, just to give a size. And again, the first message comes out is that UK left Europe in a certain way. Has been a sort of Brexit, but still Europe lost a big piece of innovation, because again, you can look see at the number, UK by far is the largest innovation.
Just wanted to clarify one thing. We didn't leave Europe. We left the European Union, Alberto.
Yes, you're right. Yes, for again, it's a bit.
Left Europe as an island.
That's fine, but still, we lost a big piece of innovation, a big chunk of innovation, because again, the number of UK are definitely put together. You need to put together Germany and France to get close to that. And again, this is again, there is something in the north of Europe, because we don't have the number of the Nordics. But again, the density of innovation is definitely growing the more we move to the north. And UK has definitely been the pivotal ecosystem for Europe. And again, numbers are relevant. We need to get the higher density, higher the concentration innovation. You need to go to Israel, and you can find definitely number of capital investors similar to the UK, despite obviously the two GDP are not exactly the same. Again, we have 9 million population versus something that is way bigger. and the numbers are, in terms of capital deployed, are similar to the UK. We're talking about over 100 billion for both ecosystem. Obviously, in UK we have a larger number of scale-ups, 3.6K versus 2.6, and then obviously when you go to Silicon Valley, where you come from, again you see that it's a definitely different league. There are some other emerging ecosystems here and there, but I think the main message that comes out of here is that UK is a relevant and important ecosystem. The second message that I like just to give to your thoughts is that UK, like by the way all the other ecosystems, shows a strong concentration of activities. Again, more and more, I remember a very, very beautiful article on the Financial Times was saying that actually countries are a bit old-fashioned as concept, because together is a strong concentration of innovation around hubs, and hubs are typical cities, and most of the time we're talking about the capital cities. And for UK, this is exactly the case. We're talking about a good 68% of the scale-up concentration in the capital, and 73% of the capital deployed. And if you add Oxford and Cambridge, that are not exactly in the capital, but close by, the numbers go 73% for the scale-ups and almost 80% for the capital. So a strong concentration. By the way, France, similar numbers. Around Paris, we're talking about 70% of innovation. Spain is slightly different. There are two different hubs that are a certain way dividing the concentration of the Europe. Germany, similar again, despite the GDP is not exactly concentrated, the population is not concentrated as innovation. Innovation looks concentration. So the first question for you, Priya, is try to go through this number, trying to understand why UK is at the forefront of innovation in Europe. So what will be the reasons? And then looking a bit of the numbers, why this concentration, or if there is something that is some other areas that is emerging, and if there is some other interesting trends that we might have missed.
So I think the reality is that where does innovation come from? Innovation comes from talent, and the UK has always been a large centre for global talent in terms of history, but in terms of the future as well. And actually one of the things that this current government has introduced, which is very beneficial for innovation and startups, is a scale-up visa, and also a talent visa. So essentially trying to create a system where people can come into the UK and scale and build businesses here, irrespective of where they're coming from. So there have been a number of different visas around in recent years, but the Scaleup visa specifically is a relatively new initiative. But that's because we recognize that actually the type of talent that's needed to build a scale-up is slightly different actually than a talent needed to build an early stage company. And so we want to be able to bring in that experience and expertise from all around the world, wherever it comes from. But just coming back to sort of the strengths of the UK's innovation system, I think the other element that's really important to note is actually a lot of the innovation comes out of higher education. In the UK, we have a large number of world-leading higher education institutions. You know, there are the obvious ones, obviously Oxford and Cambridge, but Imperial, also based in London here, is a very, very strong generator of really innovative, cutting-edge scaling businesses, with also a really good support system in place to help those academics spin out their businesses and scale, found and fund them as they're going out of the institution.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because one of the key elements is really the ability of those ecosystems, not just to attract talent, but also to have the right tools at the very beginning and finding the first validation from the business world still when you are inside academia, which is the biggest, very hard step forward. It's not just the research, but it's also the ability to implement. What are the structures that you can mention that today are very active in that ability of creating the first step to entrepreneurship?
I think what you see is that the higher education institutions that do the best in terms of spinning out companies are ones that put in place quite comprehensive programs of support for academics for exactly the reasons you state, Marco. The reality is there are many cultural barriers to spinning out a business as an academic, and historically perhaps it hasn't been as valued as it should have been in terms of getting out that innovation to the real world. So what institutions, for example Imperial that I was talking about, they have a very large enterprise hub which gives training and support for those academics and researchers that do want to take their inventions out. There's also a great program that I've been involved with for some years now called We Innovate, that actually is around supporting female academics and women-led businesses as they spin out of Imperial. So also thinking very specifically on those segments of the population that haven't historically been included in the innovation ecosystem. But just coming across to other elements that I think make the UK a very strong place to grow and scale innovation businesses is the capital. You talked about the statistics at the beginning there, more funding raised here than France and Germany combined. But we're also seeing a strong commitment to release even other forms of capital that historically haven't been investing in the innovation space. And specifically, we're sitting here right in the City of London, specifically pension assets. There's been new legislation that this government has committed to actually allow pensions to invest as LPs in the venture capital sector, which is going to be a really exciting step forward and aligning us with what you see in the US or Canada, where pension funds are very consistently LPs in the largest VC funds.
I wasn't aware that before that wasn't the case, that wasn't allowed.
There's been historically a limitation on the ability for pension funds to engage in those sorts of investments in the UK, but the government has committed to changing that, and so we'll see some legislation on that soon. Just to sort of tie up a couple of other things that are relevant, I think what we've seen, particularly in the past couple of years, is many of the US VC funds actually setting up shop in the UK. So the big names, the Sequoias, the Andreessens of this world, the Iconic has just set up here in the UK. And even just in 2021, I think 36% of all VC funding secured by London companies was from US VCs. So we're seeing a big connection between that sort of Silicon Valley US ecosystem and what's happening here in the UK.
Let me just ask about the elephant in the room right off, but because here, Brexit was, it's always been an open question whether that could be a deterrent or a reason for capital to move away from the city of London, or another opportunity to have different sets of reference. What do you think, if you look at specifically at the innovation economy, what was the impact of Brexit in the last few years, in particular in the ability to deploy capital?
I think the reality is we're not seeing a negative impact on the innovation ecosystem. The reason I sort of tongue-in-cheek corrected you earlier is because I think the UK's innovation ecosystem still sees itself firmly as a part of the European ecosystem. And what I think we have got to is a very pragmatic approach by our politicians in the UK to recognise that there are advantages to being connected in certain ways, but also where we have an autonomy to regulate in a way that will support innovation, we now have the freedom to do so. And I think we're seeing some of that come out in areas of legislation like the Online Safety Bill, which is currently being debated. There's a very clear commitment for the Online Safety Bill to make sure that it firstly protects the people it needs to protect, which is fundamentally important, of course, but doesn't do so in a way that stifles innovation. And I think that sort of regulatory perspective is going to be really important in the years to come to make sure that regulation doesn't stifle innovation. I just wanted to come back to the question of the UK as a whole versus the sort of golden triangle, the Oxford, Cambridge, London bit that you were referring to earlier. Please.
I think you were mentioning before, again, UK also has been a sort of bridge between Europe and the US. Again, you have been obviously connected to Europe and have a sort of fast track to the US for different historical reasons. And again, and you were mentioning the growing presence of US funds that is happening. And I was thinking about the activity of people like Sherry Cotu, Janet Coyle, Silicon Valley comes to the UK, that has started probably in the early days. Probably, I think it's celebrating something between 10 and 15 years anniversary. And I think that it's something that, again, I was about the historical position of UK, but also there's been a lot of work for trying to keeping the connection, oil and all. So maybe you can spend a couple of words about that, because I think it's super relevant.
I think one of the things that we recognize in the UK is networks really matter. And I think both of you would recognize this in terms of the value those networks, relationships, introductions can make to the journey.
Yes.
Exactly. You know this better than anybody. So I think what we have been able to see in more than the past decade, in fact, is a series of groups, networks, relationships emerging that are actively bringing together the US ecosystem and the UK ecosystem. I can talk about that specifically from the perspective of Silicon Valley, obviously where I lived for 5 years and was part of the initiatives to support founders coming over there. But it happens in other parts of the US ecosystem as well. And New York is obviously a very, very strong partner to the UK and to London in particular. But I think what we find is that, when UK companies are trying to scale their businesses, whether it's advice from peers about how to enter the US market, whether it's introductions to VC investors, having those groups and communities that they can go to ask for advice and support is really, really fundamental. So maybe just coming back to this question of the UK's innovation hubs, I think actually what we are seeing at this moment in time is both a recognition and celebration of what's happening within that Golden Triangle region that you've been talking about, and colleagues from London and Partners, who I think you're going to be talking to over the next few days, will I'm sure tell you a bit more about the amazing success story that is London in all elements of that word. But actually, we're seeing a real commitment to making sure that we're also capturing and giving opportunity to innovation coming from other parts of the country. The reality is, as you both know, innovation can come from anywhere. And one of the risks, I suppose, of having a focus on the Golden Triangle part of the UK is that you potentially miss what's happening elsewhere. We've got a great cluster emerging around Manchester, what's called the Northern Powerhouse, where you have a group of the regions around Manchester, so Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, those areas that are geographically relatively close and also have really strong elements of the ecosystem there, from funding to scale-ups to market opportunity to customers. So that's a really great story. The other one that I wanted to mention is actually Northern Ireland. And there's some really interesting companies coming out of Northern Ireland. One I wanted to mention was a company called Artemis Technologies. Artemis is actually a spin-out of the Artemis racing team that raced in the America's Cup. And so what they did was take the propulsion technology that they used for the America's Cup race and convert that into electric propulsion for the maritime industry. So right there in the harbour in Belfast, they're building electric propulsion ferries. So you're seeing this incredible sort of alignment there between, cutting edge racing technology being brought out into the maritime industry and also having potentially a huge impact on net zero, on climate, which was one last thing that I was going to touch on actually. I think the other thing that we're seeing in the UK that I'm sure will be of interest to your community is actually an alignment around profit and purpose that I'm really excited about. We're seeing a number of really great cutting edge net zero companies coming out, but also other companies that are very determinedly tackling the issues of the day. We saw that in the UK during the COVID pandemic with the emergence of the vaccine that from the Oxford labs that was then scaled by AstraZeneca and brought out to market in record time for those sorts of vaccines. Whether it's net zero, whether it's biotech or medtech, we're seeing just incredible companies that have the potential to really make a difference. One of the companies that I advise is using artificial intelligence for breast cancer detection. These are incredible concepts that if we get them out into the real world, they'll not only be successful businesses, but actually be businesses that will change the society we live in for the better. And I think that's a great way to think about what's coming out of the UK.
Again, talking about putting purpose into the equation, I believe that looking from the continent Europe perspective, I think the UK is one step ahead in terms of inclusion and diversity. I think, for example, to the work of the Entrepreneurs Network that I've been doing for trying to foster diversity and inclusion. I think, can you give us some short highlights on this kind of work and progress that, again, you have been doing as a country that probably maybe also be of benefit for everybody else?
So what you're highlighting there, Alberto, is a problem that sort of every single innovation ecosystem is facing, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's the UK. And the reality is that actually we have a huge problem globally where entrepreneurs who are not fitting the conventional stereotype of entrepreneurship, generally older white men, are not getting the opportunity. I am not, of course, talking to you, are not getting the opportunity to participate in the ecosystem and bring their ideas to market and to scale. In the UK, we have really tried to focus on this problem. I don't for a second say we yet have the solution, because we are still some way away from equity in the innovation ecosystem. But we have been focusing for some time now on gender. So how to make sure that women have a seat at the table, both for scaling their own ideas, but also for larger businesses, for example, mandating that women are on boards for the largest companies that are right here in the City of London.
If you're particularly active in that side, you want to mention a couple of words of what you've been doing in the last year?
Yes. So one of my hats is as a venture partner at a VC fund that invests in female-led innovation, Marion Ventures, which has been, just a really rewarding opportunity to see these incredible women with great ideas get funding to scale their businesses. The other area that I think is really, really important when it comes to supporting underrepresented founders is peer groups and communities, and role modeling. So we talked about developing communities between the Bay Area and the UK earlier, but actually one of the communities that is the strongest actually is the community of female founders that we first took to the Bay Area and have done so every year since 2015. And that's an incredible network where, people are still in touch on a daily basis and support each other through the trials and tribulations. But it's not just about women. The reality is that there is a major problem in the US, the Europe, the UK around Black founders having a seat at the table. The statistics for Black founders are as bad, if not worse, when you're comparing them to statistics for women. And then also, there are other groups that we need to really focus on, and disabled founders is there's another area. Why aren't we giving the opportunity for founders, for wherever they come from, to have the opportunity to scale their businesses? And just to close that off, I think the really important thing to recognize is why. Too often we think about inclusion in innovation ecosystems as something around sort of corporate social responsibility, that it's the right thing to do and therefore we should do it. Yes, of course, it's the right thing to do, but that's not why we should do it. The reality is on two fronts. Firstly, if we want to bring solutions to society's biggest challenges, we have to have everybody at the ideation phase, deliberating those and finding the solutions. But secondly, and we see this time and time again with the research, it is demonstrably proven that companies with diverse leadership teams make better decisions. So actually, if you're a corporate customer, if you're an investor, you should want to have a diverse team to work with, because they will perform better as a business. So I think that is the message that I wanted to leave you with on that front.
Great. Let me just conclude with a practical question for entrepreneurs, international entrepreneurs that are looking at options of scaling. Why UK and what? So if you have any suggestions of some areas of concentration, some specific events, some organizations that can be of help in that bridging with UK.
There are a whole range of fantastic organisations that are looking at supporting the UK's relationship from an innovation ecosystem perspective in the rest of the world. We've talked about London and Partners. The Department for International Trade is also there to support an individual service, as you might call it, in terms of supporting what your ambitions might be. But actually, there are some amazing community-led initiatives or private companies that are also involved in this space. There is London Tech Week, which is a collaboration between numerous different partners in the UK ecosystem coming together for a week, usually in June, to showcase, discuss, and meet. So bringing people together from all parts of the world. There's always a fantastic delegation we had over 300 people from Asia last London Tech Week who came in for that event. So really, really wonderful time to come and just see what's happening in the UK. But there are other organisations. There's Founders Forum, there's CogX. There's lots of organisations that are doing events here in the UK. And in fact, one of the things that you won't struggle for is an event to attend that's related to your business. But I think the reality is that the UK is a great foothold to start your business, but also to scale and then to look at sort of global ambitions from the UK.
Excellent. I think this is very useful and something to act on, in particular for the founders out there. I forgot to mention that Priya is also here because she's one of the judges of Corporate Startup Stars. So thanks for being part of that community. Much appreciated. And we'll see you later here during the event. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you for having me.